Today we will be doing a bit of Power Query. This is a continuation of the evening refresher series that we've been having all along. So just a bit of background. In our evening series, which we usually post after the series, we usually post on our YouTube channel. In our evening series, we started a bit with data management in Excel. So in data management, you remember we were taken through a bit of data cleaning and then the general data management, how to clean up and how to organize your data before moving into your analysis and summarization. Because it's after that data management video that we moved into the data summarization part, where we did a lot of summarizations using pivot tables. And then remember after that, we moved into data visualizations where we looked at, we were taken through charting. And when you have your data, how do you chart out your data? How do you present really nice, aesthetically pleasing reports? And from there, we touched a bit on data modeling. Yeah, just a small bit of data modeling, how to link maybe some tables that you had, how to link various data sets in order to combine them and give one comprehensive report. So far, that's what we've done. If you need a bit of reminder of how to do those, please feel free to go to our YouTube channel, and I think you can remind yourselves a bit on what we did. So with whatever we want to do now, we are going to move into now the Excel power tools. The Excel power tools, the common ones are basically three. We're going to do the data management bit using the Excel Power Query. So that's where we'll start off from today. Power Query, we may not exhaust everything that is there in Power Query today. So if we continue at a later date, at least today will give us a very good grounding on Power Query. So that's what we're going to start with today. So we're going to look at data management with Power Query. And then from there on later series, we'll get to look again at summarization and analysis using Power Pivots, because earlier we had looked at pivot tables, but now we are going to move on and get to look at Power Pivots and how that really works. And then after that, the last, or what I think maybe the last power tool that we're going to look at, will introduce us to Power BI. Power BI is a powerful visualization and a very intelligent reporting tool. So that one also we may get to cover it during this series as we remind ourselves of the useful tools that we may need in Excel. So that's the plan. I hope we are comfortable with it. We look forward to having you as we go on with that journey. So for today, I'd like us to start off with Power Query. Now, before we get into the meat of this discussion, there was a data set. Actually, there was a folder that was shared with us. I hope we managed to download the folder. My colleague Janet emphasized the need for us to download the entire folder and its content, because with what we are going to do, there's a bit of this Power Query that we're going to need everything all the items that were there in that folder. So to start us off, what we are going to do, we are going to start off with the sheet called Power Query, the Excel sheet called Power Query. And then towards the end, as we proceed, we are going to see now where the uh, txt, the rest of the files, and the other folder that we had are going to come in. Now, Power Query is often referred to as an ETL tool. ETL. E stands for extract, T stands for transformation, and L stands for load. So you extract, you transform, and then you load whichever data you're going to use in Power Query. Now, if you need to locate where Power Query is within Excel, then it's not as complicated as the name. Simply come to your tabs up here. So you have your home tab, you have your insert, you have your, in my case, we have the draw tab, and then you have the data tab. So Power Query is often located on the data tab, and on the data tab within the data ribbon, this section that is to the left of the ribbon, this section, if you could follow my cursor, so this section usually contains all the Power Query elements that you're going to use. Now, for because of version differences, if you're using Excel, I'll start from Excel 2013. If you're using Excel 2013, you will have Power Query, but you'll notice that the display that you'll have here, because of version differences, it will not be the same as what I have on my ribbon. So 2016, also you will have a different display to mine. 2019, if you're using Excel 2019, then your ribbon may be somehow close to what I'm using, because this is Office 365. So don't worry, you have the Power Query tool, but because of version differences, the arrangement of these buttons within the ribbon as they're here may not be the same as what I have, but you have it. So as we move on, if you're not looking at the same thing that I have, just know that it's there. I'll try as much as possible to keep all of us, not to lose any of us who may be using a different version from what I have. So when we want to do a bit of management with Power Query, first of all, it gets to solve the age-old problem of Excel. For a long time, Excel had been known as not uh, not being very conducive with very large data sets. So right now within Excel, Excel can only accommodate a maximum of 1 million. If you go to the very, very last row in Excel, so I'm going to, with the data management skills that we are taught, and to navigate to the very last row that I have here in my Excel, meaning, just as a reminder, I'm going to press Control and the down key. So if you check on my Excel, I've navigated to the very last row that we have in Excel, which is row 1,048,576. Now beyond this, Excel cannot accept any more entry. Either you'll get an error, and if you insist on proceeding, then what will happen is your initial entries, the first entries that you had, will be replaced with whichever entry you try to force Excel to take. Meaning, if you had a very large data set that has more than 1 million rows, then Excel may not be able to, Excel cannot handle that. Also something else, if you have a large data set and you wanted to perform an operation in Excel, then what you'll notice is that Excel is going to lag. It's in order for you to perform a single operation, then with a huge data set, Excel may not be the best tool to help you out, or this normal worksheet as it is right here may not be the best place for you to do that. So you'll notice that as you try to process whichever data you're going to process, then Excel is going to lag a bit. Now, the solution that came in to try and solve that was now what we are calling the Power Query. or whatever we have, such that instead of, with Power Query, instead of dragging all of your data into an Excel worksheet, the only thing you need to do is that you work with your data in some sort of a virtual environment. You do all your processes within that virtual environment, and then you choose whichever output you want to bring back into your Excel, making it making your Excel a bit lighter. You don't load it with too much data. Let's get into what we are talking about. Now, with this worksheet that is called data, the first worksheet that we have here, I want us to be able to manage this data that we have in order for us to produce this report that we have here, this report that is under output. From what we have here, I have these sales representatives who operate in these regions, and they sell these products of these colors. This is the revenues they generate, and then these are the dates that these products were sold. So from this, I want us to generate this simple report, a report of region against, a report of revenue against region. So if we were to do this with a pivot table, because this one has been generated with a pivot table, it will be easy. We'll simply take this into, create a pivot table with this in order to give us this report. But remember, with the data management session that we had, we were told that one of the things we need to be careful with in Excel is the date column. Make sure that your dates, Excel actually recognizes them as dates. A quick way of making sure that you have the right thing that you're dealing with, so that you don't face problems when you go to the data summarization stage, is using this drop down that you have, this filter button that you have. If you click on that, you are told that if the initial way, the fastest way of knowing that Excel has not picked the values that you have as dates is that if you look at this section and then you see these dates listed individually as they are, Excel has not tried to group them in any way for you. Like what we have here, all the individual dates, they have not been grouped either in months or in years or in whichever format. Even if you scroll down, then that's a good indication for you that Excel does not recognize that column as dates. So first, we'll need to make sure that we convert this column into dates, then we produce this report that we should have here. So how would you do that? One way of maybe converting a series of data that we have into dates will be either simply clicking on this column, and then we can come to home and then try to change these into a date. But if I look here, I can get to see that Excel Excel has already formatted this column as a date, as we have here. Excel has already formatted it as a date, but then still it does not, even though the formatting is that of a date, but it does not recognize the values we have here as dates. So how do we manage this data so that we take care of this problem? Even though we're taught of a different way of managing this, but because of time, I may not repeat that. So let's first start by taking these into Power Query. So how do we, how do we export this into Power Query? So first, make sure you click anywhere within this data set. Click anywhere within this data set, and then move to the data ribbon here. Move to the data ribbon to the left. Now, if you're using Office 365, then this is easy. The data that I have here, it's already in a table format. So you'll know it's a table because when you click within, you'll notice that you have this table tab, meaning that Excel recognizes whatever we have here as a table. So when I click within here, I can get to see the option of here. I'm importing this data into Power Query, but Power Query will ask me that, okay, now this data that I want to import into Power Query, where is it? Where does it reside? I'll simply come here and tell Excel that it resides in a table. I'm importing data from a table, this icon. So if I float my cursor on this icon, you'll notice that Excel is going to tell me that here it's going to import data from an existing table or an existing range. So if you have 2019 or 365, I think this icon is quite visible, and this is quite easy to see. If you have 2016, I guess you'll have to come to get data. You'll have to come to get data, and then there's an option of getting data from a table somewhere here. So if you click on that arrow of, I think it also calls itself get data. Once you click on that, you'll get to see from the drop down an option telling you to get data from a table or a range. So I'll click within this data, and then I'll click on this button that tells me to get data from a table or a range. Yeah. So on clicking on that, good. I'll get to see that I'm given a different window from the one that we were using. So once I click on that, now whatever we have here, this is the Power Query that we've been talking about. This is the Power Query environment right now. You'll notice that this window, it has tabs that are similar to, almost similar to what we had in Excel, but now we only have 4 tabs. So we have the Home tab, we have the Transform tab, Add Column tab, and then we have the View tab. So the Home tab, just similar to Excel and other Microsoft applications, the Home tab, it has a set of tools on its ribbon. So for Home, we have the common tools. We have the common tools that maybe you may need to use when you're within this Power Query editor window, as it's called. The Transform tab, these are more tools that help you manage whichever data set we are going to use. So there are quite a number of tools here that we are going to look at. Some you'll notice exist here, and similar ones exist within the Home tab. So your Transform tab will enable you to manage this current the data that is here within this current window that you're looking at. Now the Add Column tab, we're also going to look at that. This one will help you manipulate or manage your data set by adding columns, but you'll add columns depending on some kind of a criteria. We are going to look at that. The View tab just enables you to change the kind of visuals that you have within this Power Query editor. Because for View, a very easy example, like in this case, we have a formula bar here. This one, as we proceed, it will be quite important for us down the line as we proceed, though we won't look at how to use whichever commands we have here within this formula bar. So you can choose using this View tab. You can choose to maybe get rid of this View tab that we have here, You can choose to get rid of the formula bar that we have there, or to keep it within the display. But more of this view tab, we won't get to see much of it at this early stage. So all this, we have 4 tabs that we are going to look at. We are going to look at what they do. And then a very, very important part of the Power Query editor comes to the very right of this window where we have the query settings. If you check what we have under properties, we have the name of this query. Right now, this query is called table 3. So like we learned earlier when we're doing our earlier summarizations, it's always good to name the table that you are using so that you don't proceed with your analysis with ambiguous tables. So many unnamed tables that will make you think quite a bit before you figure out actually what they do. So our first exercise within this Power Query will be, let's rename this table that we are using. Let's call it sales report. So that if we look at this query later, and we'll get to see what a query is. If we look at this query later, we'll know that we are actually dealing with a sales report. Now, below the name is another field here that will be really important for us as we move along. Is another field called applied steps. Now, in Power Query, I've simply clicked on this field. Now, in Power Query, whatever action that we take, whichever type of data management action we take on our data set, all of it is recorded here as steps. Everything that we are going to do, every manipulation that we are going to do on our data will be recorded here as a step. Now, initially, under these steps, you'll get to see that there's an action here called change type. Now, why this is here, when we loaded this data into Power Query, now Excel got to look at the type of data that we had, and then it tried to assign the data into the type that it thought best suits it. Like the initial column, it looked at the initial column and then it tried to guess that, oh, this must be dates. So it assigned these as dates. Now, if you want to know why we are saying that it assigned this as a date, on this column header that we have here, on this date, just to the left of it, just to the left of date, you'll see an icon here, a button here. Now, for people using 2019 and 365, you'll have this icon here. Now, for some versions of 2016, this one will not exist. This one had not been fitted here on your versions. But what you can do, if you want to look at the data type that you have here, if you're using, say maybe the lower version of 2016 that still did not have this icon, you could simply come and click on this column. So actually you do a right click on this column. You can either do a right click on this column, or the easiest way, before I go to that, you can simply click on this column, and then on the home ribbon, just at the middle, at this group called transform, check there's a button here called data type. So that data type will indicate that this column has been recognized as a date. So that is, if you don't have this, icon here. I think for some versions of 2016, that one is not there, and it's definitely not there in 2013. So you can simply click on the entire of this column. On the home ribbon, come to this group called transform. Then there's a button here called data type. This data type will tell you that this one has been recognized as a date. I hope we have that. Now, our main problem why we were here was that our dates, initially Excel was not recognizing this column of dates as dates. So let's just make sure that with the data types that we have here, let's change all these data types in order for them to suit actually whatever we need. So this column, let's confirm that this is a date. So if you're using 2019 and 365, that's easy. Simply click on this button that we have here. You can simply click on this button that we have here. That will give you a drop down with the available data type options, and then make sure that that is recognized as a date. So don't pick date time. So just pick date. So you click on that. Click on date. Now, for the guys who don't have this button, an alternative for you, you can simply select the whole of this column. It will be highlighted in green. Then go to the home ribbon on the transform group, and then you can change that data type to, you can change it to date. Good. Hope you're okay up to there. Now, there's something, though this one will be a bit also a bit limited to 2019 or higher versions of 2016, but I'm sure it exists in 2019 and 365. Just below date, this header that we have, you'll notice that there's a green line that we have here. Here, you'll notice that there's a green line that we have here. Now, this green line that you have here, if you float your cursor here, it gives you an instant summary of whatever you have in this column of your data within this column. Said that it's going to, when you float your cursor here, assuming you have thousands of rows, instead of scrolling through to get to see whatever you have on, to get to see whatever all the kind of data that you have within your column, you can float your cursor on this green line, and then Power Query is going to tell you that, okay, you have 0 errors on this. You have 0 errors within this column. You have 0 empty cells, and the summary is going to be based on the first 1,000 rows that you have. It's going to tell you that, okay, 100% of your data here are valid. If you had any errors or if you had any empty cells, then just by floating your cursor here, you'll get to instantly see that there's a problem there that you may need to address. So good. Now, the data type here, we've changed it to date, which is good. Sales rep, if I click on this button, at least I can get to see that Excel is recognizing sales rep as text, so which is good. A region is also being recognized as text. I can simply see it from this button here, or I can also simply get to see it from this other button that we have up here. It's being recognized as text. Same to product, same to color, which is okay. Units are being recognized as what is it? These are whole numbers, which is okay. And then revenue is being recognized as a decimal number. but that is not okay. Revenue, we want it to be recognized as not as a whole number, but as currency. So change it from here. So either you can change it by clicking on this button and then selecting currency, or you can highlight the whole of this column, go up here to the data type, and then change that to currency. If you see this message, then that's okay. If you see a message like this, it's simply telling you that right now, whatever action you're trying to perform, we say that Power Query records all the steps that it does here. Now it's going to tell you that this step that I'm trying to perform is similar to another step that I have here. So the step that I'm trying to perform is going to change the data type in this column from decimal numbers to currency. So it's asking me, do I want to list this step as another change type down here, or do I simply want to replace whatever I have here? Now it's good practice that you don't have so many. If you can, don't have so many steps listed here. So let's just say replace the current step so that I don't have two change steps here. Now my data looks okay as it is. My data looks okay as it is. Good. So since we've cleaned that up, let's take it back to Excel. So let's make a report out of this. So how do we take this back to Excel? That's simple. Come to the Home tab and then click on this button that we have here, the arrow below this button that we have here, where we have Close and Load. But choose this option. Choose Close and Load to. So if you select on Close and Load to, again, because of version differences, when I select Close and Load to, for the 365 and the 2019 guys, you'll notice that you have a number of options here. You have 4 options. You have Close and Load to table, or pivot table report, or pivot chart, or only create a connection. I think for some versions, you may only have 2 options here. So for uniformity, let's Close and Load to a pivot table report. Since we've already worked on managing this data from the other end, I don't want to bring the whole of it back to this sheet. So I only want to create a pivot table with this, so that I can get to actually summarize whichever data I'm working on. Now, select, let's load it to a pivot table report, and then let's pick on existing worksheet, because I want this data to be here within this worksheet. So pick on existing, click on 2 rows just below what we have here, and then say okay. So either you can do that, or if you prefer, you can delete whatever you have here, get rid of whatever you have here, then also come and click on somewhere 2 rows below whatever we have there and say okay. So now we've created a pivot report on this existing worksheet. Now pivot report, you'll notice that this one comes with its various pivot table fields. Now, apart from these fields that we have here, there's something else you're going to notice that has also been created. Let me just click. This is what we have. When I click within the pivot table, we'll have the pivot fields. Let me just click outside here, outside the pivot table, and there's something that you'll notice has also been added. there are some fields that we have that have been added to the right of our worksheet. Now, these fields, uh, whatever this is, with the action that we performed on our Power Query, all those actions have been taken and then they have been listed as queries. Now, you remember when we renamed this table as a sales report, our Power Query table as a sales report, then that has been listed here as a query. So this is what we call a query. A query is simply all those steps that we undertook, all those combined together, those are now the queries. So those are what create this query called a sales report. Now this query here is telling us that from this data, we have 8,160 rows that have been loaded. So this is good. If, for instance, there was a situation whereby there was any error, then that would we'll also get that a bit of report here. We will be shown that here. So right now, everything seems to be good and well in order. So now we can proceed. So let's come to our pivot table and let's create this report that we have here. So this report is a report of region against revenue. So when I come to my pivot table, I can simply come and look for region. So I see the regions have been arranged in rows. So I'll come and pick my region and drag it to rows. And then I'll come and pick my revenues and drag it to values, since it's a value field. With that, with what we know about pivot tables, I'll do a bit of formatting here so that this one looks much more like currency. So I'll come here, do this formatting, number formatting, use 1,000 separators, and then say, okay. Now this is your report. In order to make it look something a bit presentable, that when you give to someone, they'll understand what we are talking about. Where we have row labels, we can label these as region. And then here, where we have sum of revenue, in pivot table, we cannot simply call that revenue. Why? Because the naming that we give this field cannot be the same as the naming that we have here. However, if you want to insist on naming these as revenue, then we can make a slight change. We can trick Excel to think that the namings are a bit different. So what I did here, I simply typed revenue and a small space. Excel will recognize that as a different name to what we have here. So revenue and a small space, revenue small space, enter, and that one gives us this. That one gives us this report. So right now we've created a report of a region against a revenue. But this report has been created from the Power Query that we had initially. It has been created from this query that, let me close this. It has been created from this query that we had here. Now, if you had a change of mind, if instead you didn't want to create this report, but you simply wanted to create a table, if you change your mind, then you could simply come to this query that you have here. Right clicking usually does a lot of tricks, because if I right click on this one, I'll get to see that I have so many options of what I can do with this query. If I wanted to go back to where we were on the Power Query, then simple. I could simply do an edit of that query, and that will take me back to that Power Query editor that we have. And then I can come and make whichever edit I want to do here, and then I will simply do another close and load. But this time I can only do a close and load, not a close and load too. I'll do a close and load, and that would have made any change that I needed to make here. So that was a fairly straightforward. Fairly straightforward data management example. Now I'll take us back to the Power Query editor where we were. I'll take us back to the Power Query editor where we were. How to go back to the editor? Simply come and write the easiest way so far. There are so many different ways of going back to the editor, but the easiest way for now that I'm going to show us will be simply do a right click on the sales report, and then come and click on edit. Now that will take us to the initial place that we were in, where we were doing our data management. So after we did all this, after we converted all this to date, then we made sure that all these were as well recognized as text. This one was recognized as a whole number. And then this one, we made sure that we changed it into revenue. Now, if you want to go back, to our Excel, if you want to now create the report that we did, after doing this, make sure you come to the Home tab. On the Home tab, you'll notice that there's a button here called Close and Load, but it has this downward arrow, meaning that it has more options. So close and load, if I do a close and load, initially, if it's the first time I'm doing my management, so if I'm not making if this is not an edit, if it's the first time I've done my management, there is this option. You'll notice that we'll have close and load, and then we'll have a close and load too. So if it's the first time that I'm doing my management, I'll come and click on close and load to. So when I click on close and load to, then now since this is an edit, it won't give me that, but let me shortcut it a bit. When I click on close and load to, it's going to give me this, a window that another pop-up that looks like this. So now that will give us this other window that will now dictate what we want to load. So you can either choose to load a table. That's the initial option that we have. And here we say that your version will also determine how many options you have here. There are some versions that's 20 lower versions of 2016 and 2013. There are some versions that will only have two options here, maybe a table and an option of having maybe a pivot table here. But if you're working on 2019 or later versions of 2016 and higher, then you'll notice that you'll have four options here. So in this case, in our case, with the way we created this report, we wanted this to be created as a pivot table report. So we picked on this option, and then we said, okay. So that is what ended up giving us this pivot table report that we have here. So that is how we ended up having now this this report that we have here. And then of course we rename this into region, and then we rename this into revenue. So we have a small report of revenue against region. So the rest, if you wanted it to look like what we have here, the rest is simple, a simple pivot table formatting, which you won't take so much time on it. You simply come to design and you can choose whichever format you would like for your pivot table. So with the time that is remaining, I'd like us to look at this second sheet called combined arrays. I'd like us to look at this second sheet. Now we have this sales report. We have this sales report of a company called Company ABC. So Company ABC has a product sales report. This is the description. This is the description that is given for this data that we have below, and these are the amounts. So with this report that we have here, as has been presented to us, what we want to do, we want to create such kind of a report. So I want us to create a report of product, and then in this report of product, I have the products that were sold in 2020. I have the products that were sold in 2021. I have the totals for these products here, and I also have another totals row down here. So this is the kind of report that I want us to create. And as we create this, I'll also want us to make this a bit interesting, because we have this data here, and we also have, so the data that we have here, since I know it, the data that we have here only contains 2020 values, but the data that we have here contains 2021 values. So I'll want us to use a combination of this data and this data in order for us to quickly create this report that we have here. Now, when we did our data management, our initial data management, we were told how to split this kind of data, because if you look keenly, we have something here that looks like a product called Fanta. Then if we come here in the middle, we have dates, and then finally we have something called West. So that's something that looks like region. So it's like we have a product, then we have dates, and then we have region. The product, the dates, the products were sold, and then the region that the products were sold in. So quickly, let's try and clean up this data that we have, such that we can be able to create a report like this out of this data. So always our first step is, let's take this data into Power Query. So how do we export it to Power Query? Or if I come to the Power Query side, how do I import this data into Power Query? So we said, click on anywhere within this. Click on anywhere within this data, just to make sure that click on anywhere within this data to make sure that that is what Power Query will pick. Go to the data tab up here. Go to the data tab up here. Now this data already exists within this worksheet that we have here. It's, even though it's not a table, it exists as a range of cells here within this worksheet. So since it's here and I want to get it into Power Query, I'll come and tell Power Query to pick this data from an existing range. So I'll just come and click on this button here called range. If you don't have this, we say that because of version differences, if you don't have this button called range, simply come to this icon that we have here. On this arrow, you'll notice that there's something that will Power Query will tell you either to get the data from a table or a range from the options that you'll get here. But if you have this icon as we have it here, simply come and click on it, and then you'll see the running borders highlighting for you where Excel is going to pick that data from. So for now, since this is not a proper table, don't pick this option where we are told that my table has headers, and check it. Since this is not a proper table, so just uncheck it. My table does not have headers. Then you say, okay. Now in data management, still picking from the data management class that we had in a number of videos earlier, we were told that the data that you finally get to summarize, only pick what you need. So discard things that will not help you during data management. Like in this case, I can see everything from row 1, row number 2, row number 3. All these, we don't need them. They will not help us when you're doing our data summary later. So let's get rid of all these. So let's get rid of row number 1, row number 2, and row number 3. Now with the Power Query, unlike the normal Excel worksheet that we're used to manipulating, Power Query, you can't do something like coming and selecting all these and then doing a delete. That one will not work. So what you do is in Power Query, how you get rid of rows, click on this and then come to this option called remove rows. Then click on here within the home tab, remove rows, then remove top rows. So you click on remove top rows. Then you have to count how many rows do you want to get rid of. We want to get rid of the first 1, 2, 3 rows. We get rid of the first 3 rows. And I want you to note that as we do that, as we've done that, then here on the applied steps, I want you to look at what has happened. Initially, we had this change type. When we removed our rows, we have another step here that was added called remove top rows. So like we said, every action that you perform is recorded here as a step. So we have that, we've removed our top rows. And then now for this, we can't do our analysis on this column as it is, since all these have been merged into one. So I can see something called Fanta here, and then I can see something something that looks like a date, and then I can see something called a region. So let's split this column into 3 so that we have this product, we have this date, and then we have these regions. Now Power Query, it's simple. It's just as direct as that. So right now, what do we want to do? We simply want to split this column. So there's an option here on the home ribbon called split column. So you simply come and click on split column, and then whatever is separating the values that we have here on our column, there's a very clear separator here within this our column. You'll notice that we have something like Fanta, and then we have space, / and space. So as long as we have a clear separator within our data set, that clear separator is also called a delimiter. So since we have a delimiter here, so we'll say that we are splitting this column by a delimiter. So what's our delimiter? Our delimiter was, it's not just a space. Here we can, in Power Query, we can specify exactly what our delimiter looks like. So our delimiter is here on this space that we have. I'll type space / space, That's our delimiter. And what do I want? I want these columns to be split at, not at the leftmost delimiter or at the rightmost delimiter only, but at every instance where that delimiter occurs. So I'll just come and say, okay, that's simple. So that will split for me these three different columns. Now with this, what I'll do, I'll come here and I'll give these columns a name that makes sense. While editing a normal Excel cell, I'll come and double click on this and call this product. I'll call this date. I'll call this region. And then I'll call this, let me just give it a name called amount. Now product, the data type here, this is text, yeah, which is good. If I come and check here, that's text, which is good. A date should be date. So I'll click on this column. Either I can change it from this button, if you have that button, or I'll come to data type here and change it to date, which is good. So let's keep that and go to the next column. These are the column called region. The data type is text, which is good. And then this other column called amount, the data type here is currency. The data type there is currency. For the other series of this, there's an error that we have here that I'd like us to come back and correct. So how comes, the question comes into this, how comes when we change this data type into date, we got these errors here? Now this error we are going to solve it using something called changing the locale. We are going to tell our Power Query that this data type that we have here, it came from a certain source. That's why it's like this. So we are going to teach Power Query how to recognize where this date formatting comes from and how to pick it and actually make sense of it and give us the right kind of formatting that we have. And also, while we're here, I'd like you to notice if I float my cursor just below here, just below the header that we have here, I'm being told that I have errors on 59% of my data set. So I'll want on the next installment of this series, on the continuation of this, I'd like us to come and then we correct this, and finally we get to make our report out of this as we also proceed to the rest of the sheets that we have. I'd like to stop at that. Thanks a lot. See you next time.